Season of Discovery has been a little bit of a rollercoaster in regards to class adjustments and implementations, but specifically for balanced druids. So here are my suggestions on how Blizzard could make it better in future phases. Starting with Eclipse, the new core system implemented as a rune in Phase 2. Bugs aside, I think it works really well for what it is. Some of my requests from Phase 1 were to give us a reason to cast both fillers and having our pushback reduced, and this fixes it. And fortunately, it also interacts with Star Surge. Some suggestions to improve the gameplay would be for Lunar Eclipse to also reduce the mana cost of Starfire, and for the system to generate Solar and Luna stacks after casting a spell instead of making it dependent on hitting the target. With the lack of spell hit and having a permanent resist chance, it can easily feel like we are being subjected to a similar RNG problem when comparing it to the Lich King Eclipse version. At the time it didn't feel good to cast the wrong spell because you weren't sure if you would get into an Eclipse. Now it doesn't feel good to cast the wrong spell because you didn't get a Solar or Luna stack because you had a resist. And besides that, if you could make Eclipse immune to the spells, it would be amazing. It's not exactly fun to lose most of our damage just because someone has a dispel. And next is Star Surge. Setting aside the huge amount of complaints, let's say that the nerfs were indeed a little bit overkill, but in fairness it wasn't a healthy ability to have in a game. The shift in power to Starfire was a good decision and gives us more avenues to make us stronger elsewhere, and one addition to this could be the reduction of the mana cost of the next Starfire when you cast Star Surge to help us with our mana. And now straight to our AoE or lack thereof. Okay, I don't think anyone is happy about casting our one and only AoE spell that practically does no damage at the cost of half of our mana and has a 1 minute cooldown. So fix Hurricane. We've known for months that they intend to use Gale Winds as a rune, but I think that the actual spell should be available with those buffs by default, or they should add it as a book like they did for some other spells. And even by doing that, it's still not enough to make it a good spell, so I would consider reducing even more the mana cost of Hurricane and increasing the damage. It is our only AoE spell after all, and it doesn't have any interaction with our talents, so to resolve this, you could allow it to crit, so it can do both more damage and interact with Dream State. You could also allow our dots to contribute to our AoE by allowing them to spread to nearby targets, like a version of the improved Sunfire or Twin Moons. And as an alternative, you could also allow Starfire or Wrath to hit multiple targets, reducing the splash damage and keeping the same amount of damage to the primary target. You could also add a new spell to boost up our AoE and add some extra utility. Once again, pulling out ideas from what is already in all the versions of the game, why not an iteration of Wild Mushrooms? You can make it do a modest amount of damage since it's actually too dangerous to start adding Snap AoE to the game, and boost Hurricane's damage by applying Dream State to all targets. To avoid button bloat, you can make it automatically trigger after a couple of seconds, and also add the slow patch after the mushrooms explode for the utility part. Now at the moment, one of our biggest issues is the lack of spell hit. Druid is the only ranged DPS that doesn't have any spell hit granted by talents, so to fix this, gear that you know that we are going to use should probably be over-itemized for us. You could use relics to do it, for example, and since you have gear tokens available, we can easily have access to a set bonus with 4% hit while others get 1%. Or instead you can just add those 3% hit directly to Fairy Fire and once again implement it by default or add it as a book. And now let's talk about dots. While making this video, the suggestion was to outright buff the damage of our dots and reduce the mana cost, which is something that you are going to implement with the next round of buffs to classes. In addition to this, they also need to last longer. In Phase 1 they already felt like it, and when you add Eclipse on top of it, it just feels clunky to maintain them. So something like Nature's Splendor, added as a passive, would solve this. On the other hand, you could allow fillers or Star Surge to extend the dots for a couple of seconds up to a cap to achieve the same effect. Another way to boost their effectiveness without messing around with damage could be by making them interactive. Something as simple as mixing the idea of shooting stars with an instant cast of Starfire would probably be a solution. Or you may want to increase the cooldown of Star Surge and fully implement Shooting Stars. You could also implement something like Waning Twilight, where we would do more damage by having 2 dots on the target. Although a downside would be that we would need to be balanced around this, which basically means having that feeling that you need to spend 2 GCDs to start doing damage, reducing our ability to swap to another target. Besides this, allowing dots to tick faster could also be explored. And for the sake of class fantasy, I'm wondering if we could have Full Moon in the game. I don't know exactly how we would do it without breaking the actual game or overbloating the spec with new abilities, so at this point, give us a version of Orbit Breaker. Just from time to time, a moon shall approach someone's face really fast. Moving on, I know that you just added another survivability cooldown as a rune in phase 2, but it's still not enough. To fix this, once again, design some extra itemization for us that is actually leather, or rework some of the runes that we already have in place. A passive like Well-Honed Instincts could be added to one of our defensive runes, or instead a version of Hulking Frenzy. It's not really out of place and it could be slightly redesigned to provide damage reduction, some mana and allow us to cast Entangling Roots instantly. Nature's Vigil is another one that could be added as a rune, which would allow us to both increase our utility and allow us to heal passively based on our damage for a couple of seconds. As for offensive cooldowns, I wouldn't mind to see a version of Incarnation. You already have the models in the game, it doesn't really look out of place in regards to what Classic is concerned, and you could actually use it as a multiple role cooldown. Obviously this would be a bad suggestion if you didn't already add Berserker to the game, but I'm sure you can figure out something for Ferals, but for us balanced Druids, a simple 5-minute cooldown that would enhance our crit or damage for 20 seconds would certainly help. And now for more of a general way to implement multiple fixes without compromising the ability to add new fun runes, the concept of an improved Moonkin form implemented as a relic could be the solution. First, relics are basically dead slots used for an underwhelming random bonus. You can easily add a slight increase to spell damage per raid phase so we keep interest in that slot. So the idea is for this relic to provide bonuses like a flat increase to nature and arcane damage, a reduction to our threat by 20%, increase our stun resist, buff our crit aura to 5%, increase our spell hit by 3%, increase the duration of Moonfire and Sunfire, a reduction in mana costs on balance spells, and also, while making this video, one of my suggestions to this was to allow us to use our utility in Moonkin form, which is something that you announced that you are going to do. And I still think that some of our healing utility that is not instant cast like Regrowth, Healing Touch or Tranquility should be allowed on that list. Or just flat out reduce the cost of shapeshifting to Moonkin form. Besides that, here's some rune suggestions or modifications to spells that don't require that much explanation. At level 60 you could implement a rune that allowed an epic version of Travel Form, by allowing 180 movement speed, and obviously this would be reduced when in combat or battlegrounds. And then Solar Beam. Yeah, it's an interrupt and I can't wait to root beam someone. Wild Charge, basically a version of Disengage, reduce the cooldown of Rebirth from 30 minutes to 10. And Mass Entanglement, gather mobs, AoE root them, Hurricane, that's all I want. And while you are at it, just make roots castable indoors. And Cyclone, our 2v1 masterpiece that should have been there from the beginning. Also, that classic Go guy cannot shut up about it. And a small thing, but can we be allowed to cast our dots without needing to face the target? I'm all up for equality here, and it doesn't seem to be an issue for mages and priests.